And here we are. We told you there's a season finale, and one of us wouldn't make it.
Yeah, that's right. We were smart enough and eliminated Josh.
That's right. That's right. We'd been planning it the whole series, the whole season.
Yeah, we had an alliance, so that's how it works. Sorry,
that's
Josh.
Right. So just to make sure, we don't get caught up in fake news, as it were, Josh will be beginning his teaching of session at DU next week, and I believe he's going to announce his topic tomorrow evening. But we wanted to make sure we gave him a Tuesday evening off in between the conclusion of Jeff's teaching and the beginning of his. So that's why. So here we are. So Jeffrey, how are you, sir?
I'm good, and fake news, can be fun sometimes. So I know you had to share what was really going on, but we could have let it go for a little while. That we kicked Josh out. But
yeah.
Okay.
Well, the problem is he's already over here making comments.
Oh, I see him over there. Yeah, he's here.
Some characters don't understand what it means to, so
taking that off.
Yeah, so what are we going to do? So, good evening, Dad. Good to see you. Glad that you're there. Oh, look at this smack talking.
I guess I'm missing some of it. What's he saying?
Yeah, Tanya wanted to know if she beat Viviana. Yeah, man.
That's all that matters. Good job, Tanya. Did you beat her?
Yeah. I don't see Viviana yet tonight. I don't know. If there's.
How's your day been?
It was good. We opened with Pastor's Fellowship here this morning and had a visit with the Assistant Chief of Police. And, he shared with us some of their goals of hopefully inviting the church and especially pastors to be more integrated into the ministry to the police department, but also through the police department. So that was very cool that he would take time to come and visit with us. And I think it really says a lot about especially our police department. And he gave us just some really insightful firsthand information when it comes to many of the challenges that we're wrestling with culturally and informationally. So that was awesome. And so we had that and had some folks come by. I had a couple of impromptu counseling sessions and whatnot. So it's been a good day.
It's a good day, but I think that's about typical for you though. So that's kind of like a normal day, right?
Yeah, pretty normal. Now, what wasn't normal was getting up this morning and going, "Ooh, it's a little chilly."
So I sat out. I went out last night or this morning with my coffee and did my devotional out there on the back porch, and man, it was nice. It was nice. Yeah. It was actually a little chilly because I was in shorts and a t-shirt. So I was like, oh, okay, this is a little chilly.
Well, Josh got to wear a hoodie, so he was a very happy camper today. So if he was playing Christmas music, he had it on the DL because I didn't hear it. But
well, little bummed the Stars couldn't pull it off, but they just got beat. So they were just
I think the Lightning probably were better than them slightly if everyone was on full term, but those poor guys. They gave everything, and it was funny because I was thinking, man, how can I tell them just how much I appreciate having them to watch, and I'm not gonna lie, I've kind of enjoyed having this great big thick sports meat sandwich over the last few weeks, and I haven't watched one. I don't think I've seen one inning of the Rangers, which apparently I hadn't missed much, but
playoff start and the Rangers once again will not be in it. So,
but won't the World Series be in their stadium?
It will, I think.
Okay,
I think
how weird is that?
there? Yeah,
that's so weird. So,
I don't know what to think. It's 2020. That's all I can say.
It is and now, the Stars should be beginning preseason. So I don't know when they'll move that. Now, as an Allen American fan, they're scheduled to begin their season on the 4th of December.
Wow.
So I'm going to have a little bit of a hockey break, and then hockey's back. So
that's good. That's good.
It's going to be very interesting. And man, there are gals and kiddos just piling in over here. Oh, for those
mom to mom, yeah.
Yeah, we've got mom to mom on campus, and because of our wonderful security system, I have a 4-picture array here on my iPad, so I can monitor the parking lot and the driveway, and keep a safe eye on them while.
Hey, and this segment is not sponsored by them, but I'll go ahead and mention them because they're good folks down at Texas Alarm Pros. So kudos to those individuals for setting us up.
Absolutely, and they're just good people. They just good people, and they make a good product. And I tell you what, on the rare occasion that I need help from them, they're very prompt. So, yes.
Well, let me tell you a story. The reason why I said kudos to them. So this morning I woke up to you have the break glass sensors in the house, so I have my stuff through them, and it said low battery, 5:30 this morning. So I'm thinking, okay, I'll get the ladder out later. About 8 o'clock, I get a text from one Alan Ross and says, "Hey, you've got a battery out in your break glass sensor. I'll be by a little bit later to change it." And I was like, that kind of floored me. Who does that?
Jeff,
that was awesome.
I've read the ancient text, and I think that's what they used to call customer service.
I think so. I think he's figured it out. So anyway,
that's pretty cool. So
yeah, that's pretty nice.
So Jeffrey, I've really enjoyed this, and I think you've done an outstanding job. And I know that our goal is to probably land the plane a few minutes early because you have additional obligations tonight. You're wearing many, many hats.
Yes.
Oh, look, Viviana make an excuse for tardy.
All
the principal says no. So how about we go ahead and kind of lean on in?
Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started because I want to end just a couple minutes early. A lot of I'm part of Rafa Clinic, and we have our online sort of get together tonight. So you can probably see me start a watch party for that as well around 7 o'clock. And if you want to join me, I would appreciate you being there. But yes, we are finishing up the series on the book, So You Want to Be Like Christ. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, and I appreciate the opportunity that Jimmy and Josh has given me to come and teach, and they've been patient and with me. So it's been a good time. So here we are on our last two disciplines. We're going to cover self-control and sacrifice tonight. So I would encourage you, if you haven't been able to pick up the book, I'd still go ahead and pick it up and read it over the fall. It's a great little read, and so you want to be like Christ. If you do, pick up this book, and it'll help you through some of these disciplines. So self-control. There's probably a couple examples of things that are pretty common among all of us in this particular area. And sometimes we exceed our wisdom when we fail to restrain ourselves in a couple areas. One is interfering where we have no business interfering in, sort of meddling, as they say. And two, speaking when we should remain silent. So if you think you don't have issues with self-control, we probably all have issues with that. We probably all kind of leaned in when we shouldn't have. We probably all have either spoken when we should have remained silent, or typed those words instead of just walking away from the keyboard. So all of us really suffer from a common ailment, and that would be a lack of self-control. We're going to look at Romans chapter 7. I'm going to go read all these verses, 14 through 25. And this is a passage, it's the conflict of two natures. And so let me pick up in verse 14, and it says, "For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am of flesh, sold into bondage to sin. For what am I doing? I do not understand. for I am not practicing what I would like to do, but I am doing the very thing I hate. But if I do the very thing I do not want to do, I agree with the law, confessing that the law is good. So now, no longer am I the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. For I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh, for the willing is present in me, but the doing of the good is not. For the good that I want, I do not do, but I practice the very evil that I do not want. Verse 20. But if I am doing the very thing I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it, but sin which dwells in me. I find then the principle that evil is present in me, the one who wants to do good. For I joyfully concur with the law of God in the inner man, but I see a different law in the members of my body, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin, which is in my members. Wretched man that I am, who will set me free from the body of this death? Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, on the one hand, I myself with my mind am serving the law of God, but on the other hand, with my flesh, the law of sin. Here we see Paul is writing of his own experience. Paul is an undisputed spiritual giant. We can probably all agree on that. Paul certainly led by example. Paul's actions lined up with his words. But here we see Paul giving us sort of his own confession of his struggles with doing what he knows he should do, but at times doing things that he should not do. And again, Paul's not saying that he intentionally behaves differently than what he knows is right. He's saying, hey, this is the life that I live. And it's probably the same for us. As Christians, we want to do the things of God, but a lot of times we fall back into sin. We kind of lack the self-control sometimes in certain areas, and we slip back into that old way of life. And it's these two natures, this fleshly nature and this godly nature, that's always wrestling one another. And Paul's saying, this is the life as I live it. I have this unending struggle, and I'm just trying to get through life. I'm just trying to experience. He doesn't understand it, but he knows that he knows that he should go one way, but he ends up going another way. And that's just like us. And then later in verse 18, he says, for I know that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh, for the willing is present in me, but the doing of good is not. Paul is willing to do good. Paul is willing to follow God. Paul is willing to be disciplined in the things of God, but he ends up not doing it. So here we have this legend of the faith, you will, with Paul, who's being very honest and very authentic. And he's saying, I can will it, but I can't pull it off. I want to do right, but I just can't make it happen sometimes. I promise myself each day that I will not let my mouth get the best of me. Then I regret something I said. That's Jeff talking. And I can count, the times over and over again that I've asked myself, why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I not do this? I know better. And Paul, he kind of gets to the root of this in verses 20 through and 23. And let me read those again. He says, but if I'm doing the very thing I do not want, I am no longer the one doing it, the sin which dwells in me. I find then the principle that evil is present in me, the one who wants to do good, for I joyfully concur with the law of God in the inner man. But I see a different law in the members of my body, waging war against the law of the mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin, which is in my members. We all have inner struggles. So the question is, what is yours? I've listed a few here that I'll mention tonight. And we all have these areas of life that we wage war against, right? And that sometimes it takes charge over us when we least expect it. And you going to add something?
Come on yeah. Yeah. Well, I keep waiting for you to ask a question. So
okay.
Well, the interesting about we all have a war to wage, but the enemy can change as we mature, both in our age and in our spirituality. We can find ourselves at war with differing things. As a grandfather, it's different than being a father. It's similar, but it's a little different. And I think one of the greatest fallacies is to think we reach a place where there's never a battle. It may not be the same battle, but it can be still a battle. And, you know, I'm 33 years in the faith, and I still have battles, and I get very frustrated sometimes because I think surely by now, you know, but.
Well, because you may conquer one thing, and when I say conquer, it, you know, you're disciplined and have the self-control in a certain area, but then something else will creep its ugly head up, right? We all have skeletons in here. Oh, I didn't know I had that skeleton in my closet. Now let's start dealing with this one, whether it could be, you know, being honest or temper or laziness or pride or sexual addiction or, you know, going to the wrong sites or, you know, destructive thoughts, you know, those type, you know, we can all struggle with different things, but once we conquer one thing, there's probably something else that they, you know, they are just like you're saying. So,
Well, if I could go back to the analogy of waffle, I hadn't had dinner. So if the Holy Spirit is the syrup, as it invades each designated hole in your waffle, then you have to deal with what's in that hole. Mm-hmm. And as we spiritually develop, it's going to reach into other places. And in that place, it may have its own fight. You know, a 20-something can wrestle for the fight of significance, just like a 50-something can. Mm-hmm. Same fight, completely different time frames in life. But you can have that same fight when you are in that particular section of your waffle.
Absolutely. You know, we all want to do what's right. We all want to do the right thing. You know, we call ourselves Christians. We're, you know, we want to be more Christ-like. But Paul is saying just wanting to do right is not going to get you there. That's part of it. But we want to choose obedience, but we end up choosing sin a lot of times. And sometimes we would swear that we have the split personality, and we say, I've got this crazy war raging inside of me. You know, I want the things of God, but yet, you know, I want the things of Jeff too. So, and it's always this battle, right?
All of the prisons would be empty if wanting to do right was all that we needed to do.
That's right. What's the old thing? Hell is paved. What is it? The
road to hell is paved with good intentions. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
That's right. So you and I and everyone listening and Paul, we're all in this war. We're all in this war of our two natures, you know, constantly battling each other. And the thing is if we want to be more like Christ and we want to cultivate this discipline, is we need to admit it, and we need to solve for it. And instead of convincing ourselves that we're just okay, and that, you know, it'll be okay. And sometimes, you know, we're right in the middle of this fight and, you know, back and forth between the two natures. And the sad thing that Christians do is they choose to wage war by themselves, and they try to do battle by themselves in and of their own strength. They become isolated. They get out of sight. And, you know, it's a wonder that some may feel, you know, start to feel, you know, defeated by sin, and they seriously want to, you know, give up this walk, and they start beating themselves up and say, I'm not good enough for myself. How can I be good enough for these church people or good enough for God? And you know, the world wants to tell us that the inner struggle is okay. You're not hurting anyone, but God wants us to deal with those things. And Proverbs 25:28 says, like a city that is broken into and without walls is a man who has no control over his spirit. Or when we fail to control our desires, when we allow our natural inclinations to control us, it's kind of like, I think the author says, it's kind of like it's a bank vault with a screen door. It's not going to do much good, right? And failure to exercise discipline in this area of self-control is an open invitation for the world, for the adversary, for whatever, to rob us of all the good things that we receive from God. So,
well, the self-discipline is damaging to the individual, because you will eventually become so discouraged you will abandon. But it also is detrimental to others, because if you vocalize or give visual evidence of a professed faith, but you live a life of no control, then that is a terrible testimony. It's damaging on so many levels. Self-control is that I was having a conversation today about patience with someone, and the unfortunate truth is there's only one way to learn patience.
Yep.
That's just the unfortunate truth. Self-control is the same thing. There's only one way to learn it, and it's one decision at a time. It's when these things, because we can seek to manage what we see, like the little nursery rhyme, oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. We can do our very dead level best to manage those things. However, life and unexpected things it's inevitable.
Yep.
And so we can be very intentional, and in those we can learn how we would respond to the unplanned.
Absolutely. Let me give sort of 8 steps to living above ourselves or above the flesh. So again, we go back to Romans. We talk about the 2 natures. We have our selfish, fleshly nature, and we have our godly nature. As believers, and we're always at war with those. But the first thing we need to do is we need to accept that there is an internal war that's waging within the believer. That it's always a constant battle between the things of God and the things of Jeff. Chinese general Sun Tzu wrote in The Art of War, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles. So the first thing that we need to understand is we have this battle raging within us. And if we try to say we don't, we're kind of kidding ourselves, and we're setting ourselves up for failure. So the first thing is to know your enemy. And unfortunately, folks, the enemy is ourselves, in this. We should understand the cycle of sin. As a believer, we have the Spirit of God within us. But we also have, our old nature too. We still have a sinful way of thinking and, approaching things. The flesh, which is a pattern of our living. We've been doing it since birth, right? So even though you've been walking the Lord 30 something years, you still have the sin nature, right? So, Paul refers to the flesh as their inclination to their former self before Christ. But as we believe in Christ and we accept him, everything changes for us. Old habits die hard. Our flesh never forgets. It's like you can't train your body not to know how to ride a bike. If you know how to ride a bike, you'll always know how to ride a bike. You might not be good at it. Your balance may be off, but you still kind of know how to ride a bike, right? And I think I've heard you say, Jimmy, you haven't forgotten how to sin. You just choose not to. Now,
right.
And we say sin, you sin like everyone else, but certain areas that you struggled with as a 20-something, right?
Well, here's a T-shirt worthy hot sports opinion. You are a greater adversary to you than Satan is.
That's right.
Because Satan is limited in where he can be and what he can do, but you got to live with you 24/7.
Every day. That's right.
Boy,
so we understand. Absolutely. A lot of people, and I know you and Josh touched on this, but it's worth mentioning is, people give Satan way too much credit, right?
Right.
He can't be everywhere, right? We certainly don't want to open the door. We certainly don't want to give him a foothold into our lives, but, he's probably not battling with you every single day, but we battle with our internal nature every single day. Galatians 5 talks about we understand the cycle of sin. It says, for the flesh sets its desire against the spirit. We set ourselves against the things of God, and the spirit against the flesh, for these are in opposition with one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. But if you're led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Now the deeds of the flesh are evident: immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, enviness, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these. And it's kind of like a et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, we have to understand that we're always in this cycle of sin. We always have, that's why we have to cultivate this discipline of self-control so we can actually train ourselves out of it, right? Because we've been in the flesh since birth. So our flesh versus the spirit, Galatians 5:16 says, but I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desire of the flesh. The only hope we have against obedience to the flesh is the Spirit. We have to be obedient to God. when we are walking in the Spirit, when we are in obedience to God, when we're in His will, we're not walking in the flesh, we're walking in God's will. So if we realize that the Spirit and the flesh oppose one another, and the foundation of living this so-called Christian life is walking by the Spirit, we should walk by the Spirit. And then we'll do more and more the things of God and less the things of Jeff. It's not that we'll completely weed all that out, because we won't on this side of heaven, but we'll understand that we have a personal war, and over time we'll win more spiritual battles than we will fleshly battles if we're cultivating this discipline of self-control. But if we don't, here you'll like this reference. The truth is that if the flesh wins too many battles in our own personal war, then we become nothing more than a member of the Walking Dead. So, yeah,
I like that right there.
Yeah, I think that was even in the book, so I can't take 100% credit on that. But we want to get to a point where we win more battles. Yeah,
that's. Far too often, it walking by the Spirit really comes down to a matter of love. If you want to love the Lord more than you want to love yourself, because that's really what the civil war is do you love the Lord more than yourself? Do you want what He wants more than what you want? And, that's not easy. And if you've ever been a parent and you choose between what you may want, if you want to go to the Bahamas and they want to go to Disney World, you may have to choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's what the civil war inside ourselves is. That's what the civil war outside of ourselves is when we are able to tame ourselves, when we are not the end all be all of all things. That's when we begin, and that'll give in to the sacrifice here, lead into the sacrifice.
Yeah, absolutely. The good news is in Galatians 5:22-23, but the fruit of the Spirit is love. It's joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, which we're talking about right now. Against such things, there's no law. So, we need some good news. We've just been talking about some bad news, how horrible we are, and we lose the battle more than we win it probably. But here, if we walk in the Spirit, there's some good news. And my lessons are running together. I don't know if I talked to Holy Spirit last week or I think it was in our Sunday school class, but God has given us the Holy Spirit to work within us. He said, God with us is good, but God in us is even better. So as corrupting as sin can be, His Spirit is all the more cleansing, in our lives. Where sin leads to a rotten harvest of, let me go back up, of a rotten harvest of our immorality and impurity and sensuality and idolatry and envying and all those things. The fruit of the Spirit leads to peace and patience and gentleness and love and joy and self-control and all those things. So the Spirit of God produces at least 9 positive qualities in us. The last the least not being self-control, but it is mentioned. So,
as you're mentioning that list, I can still remember all these years later the spirit of anxiety that I lived in prior to coming to knowing Christ. I mean, just a constant, and it was magnified, when things in my life, bad things happened in my life. But even on a good day, there was this energy, and it really is amazing, because now that I don't live with that white noise that I still remember today.
Yep. Hey, there is, I've known several people throughout my life who have just had a calming peace about them, no matter what the situation was. And, it was because of their close walk with the Lord, and that peace just comes over you. So there's I don't think you can put a price on peace, for sure. So, so self-control leads to greater freedom. As we cultivate this discipline of self-control, it's a 7 of 8 here. we start to experience victory over the very things that we despise. Remember Paul saying, hey, I know what I'm supposed to do, but I don't do it. I do the very things I don't want to do. But as we start cultivating this discipline of self-control, we can experience victory, maybe small victories, but small victories over the very things that we despise in ourselves. If we, despise our quick temper, we can start having small victories over that. If we despise our, prideful attitude, we can start having small victories over that. And as, the Spirit will start doing transforming work in us. And, before long, the Spirit will remind us and say, hey, Jeff, don't say that. Don't go there. Don't do that. Turn back. Go ahead.
And we don't want to minimize our responsibility in this. We need to do our very best to set ourselves up for a win. That means we need to recognize where our limits are. If there's a topic of conversation that we wrestle with, staying in control, then you probably don't need to talk about that for a while, Right. And far too often, I think people want to win. They want to have self-control, but they allow themselves to be drug into the deep water and find themselves failing when they might have been able to save themselves from the temptation.
Absolutely.
We have to. You're an alcoholic. You don't go in a bar.
Right. You have to set boundaries, and then you have to have the self-control to not cross those boundaries. You have to have the discipline. We've been talking about obedience and discipline and self-control and all these things, for the fourth week now. But you're absolutely right. Is that we have to draw some lines in the sand, and then when we draw those lines in the sand, the Spirit can remind us and say, "You're not supposed to go there. You're not supposed to cross that line. Count to 10 before you speak. Count to 10 before you type." That's more appropriate today. Probably.
Type it, delete it, type it, delete it.
Yep. Type it if you need to, but don't put anybody in the 2 line. Right? Just type it and then delete it. So that's right. I did quite a few of those in my work days. All right. So there's a purpose and a strategy. 1 Corinthians 9:24-27. Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but only one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may win. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. They then do it to receive a perishable wreath, but we an imperishable one. Therefore, I run in such a way as not without aim. I box in such a way as not beating the air, but I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that I have preached to others. I myself will not be disqualified. Paul is a sports fan. Jimmy's a sports fan, so am I. Paul was one. These games were held every couple of years. They included running and wrestling and boxing, and Paul kind of drew his analogies or word pictures from that. But the purpose of competing is to win. You said this last week. If we're going to keep score, I want to win.
That's right.
I'm a highly competitive individual, so even in this Christian walk, I want to win, and and winning is I want to be more obedient. I want to be more Christ-like. That's winning, right? So I compete to win. The strategy in winning is to exercise self-control in all things. Verse 25. Everyone who competes in the games exercises self-control in all things. The athlete doesn't go out and do whatever they want the night before they compete, or the week before, the month before, the year before, right? They are disciplined. And that's their secret sauce for the athlete is they are disciplined. So if we want to win in this walk, we need to exercise self-control, and we need to have discipline and set our boundaries and kind of stick to it. So,
and if you want to carry that sport analogy over about being disqualified, I'm not going to say 100%, because in the field of competition for life, there is that rare occasion that you can be innocently caught up in something that you didn't know.
Yeah.
It can happen, right? It can happen. But I think we all can agree that the vast majority of events that cancel ourselves, that negate our qualifications, are of our own doing. As a pastor, there's, I'm trying to think through, there's very small space where, I would find myself caught in something that I was completely unaware of, yet still. But about 98% would have my fingerprints all over it. And to be mindful of that, because, I'm like you, Jeff, I want to finish life well, not only for my bride's sake, my children's sake, but first and foremost for the Lord's sake. I want to finish this race, and I'm reaching that place in my life now where if I were to fumble the ball and to negate myself, it'd be tragic.
Yeah.
Tragic. Because there's no time. Well, let me back up. There would be far less time for reestablishment, repentance, those sort of things.
Right.
And in this world today, it's hard. It's hard to come back from those things because it goes everywhere, and everyone has an opinion, and they share, and it just. So we need to be mindful that when we stumble and fall, and if we can't, it very well end up at our own feet.
Absolutely. And Paul's focus was Christ. Paul's focus was not the wreath at the end of the race. Your focus, and I'll speak for you, is not that people will say great things about you. You want to be well respected by your peers, but your focus is Christ and Christ alone, because that's what motivates you. And that's what we should, for us, right? Our goal and prize is to the glory of God, is the focus of Christ. So we don't, we're not shadow boxing, shadows. We have a real opponent, in ourself. We have our old nature. We have the adversary at times. We have the world. We have a lot of external pressures. But when we run this race, our focus should be on Christ and Christ alone, because he is the goal and the prize of our lives for which we should run. So, and then, this last one, we should, or second last one, we should show our body who's boss. But I discipline my body and make it my slave, so that after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified. We must learn how to say no to our selfish selves. We all say yes to things that are of no good for us. Our flesh wants to do certain things. We give into it way too much, and I'm saying we, as in me, and we need to learn to say no. And that's probably all I need to say on that. We should learn to say no. Meet your impulses head on. In an unguarded and unexpected moment, something can grab our attention. Something might draw us off sides, if you will. But we should have an honest acknowledgement of that temptation. What are the things that draw us off sides? And we need to, before we get into those things, have boundaries. If I was to struggle with sexual temptation, I should not be going out where, a bunch of young ladies are by myself. It should not happen. If I'm short-tempered because I can't stand, something in the political season, maybe I shouldn't be commenting or even reading about it.
Yep.
We need to set our boundaries, know what our weaknesses are, plan for them ahead of time, so we know what our decision is. Right.
One key element to win the self-control battle is to build in the break. And let me explain what that means. Is, like I said, we need to manage what we can manage, but we also agree that there are things that we cannot manage. And when you can reach a place in your life where when something comes at you unexpectedly, you can take in the pause. And what I say, it's like, if you hit your hand with a nail or with a hammer or something, it still hurts, but when you can take in the pause and you realize, okay, all right, or, whether it's traffic or whatever it is, because in that pause is where you can count the cost for the next decision.
That's right.
And it takes a ton of work. It takes a deep desire. And if you can do that, if you just, like I said, social media, all these things, if you can learn to build in the pause, you can count the cost. And if you can count the cost, then more often than not, you should win this battle.
Mm-hmm.
You should be able to win this battle. But if you just allow your emotions, well, I'm just a fiery guy and I just got to say what I feel. Well, guess what, sir? You're going to burn your house down with you in it. That's what's going to happen.
That's right. And some things aren't worth, the cost. So.
No, sometimes it's just better to be quiet. And let me tell you, as a sanguine, opinionated, trust me, I've always got something to say. But I'm a wiser man because someone gave me some very bitter medicine when I first took it. But I can honestly say today I'm better. Am I perfect? No. But I can honestly say I'm a better man today in building in the pause.
Yeah, because you're starting to win those battles a little at a time, right? And you get a couple small wins, you get a little confidence, and then you start building upon that for a greater war. So, as we come to the end of self-control, if you want to be like Christ, refuse to surrender to the flesh, to the fleshly nature that wages war within all of us, within every believer. And how
important is self-control? Well, if we understand biblical truth, God spoke everything into existence. God could speak it out. What if Jesus had one slipped statement?
That's true. No longer. And then just done. So, all right, well, let's talk about Christ in sacrifice and giving over. This is the last discipline. No other discipline that we've talked about, in this particular series is more strongly associated with the character and mission of Christ than sacrifice. Yes, Jesus, he had an intimate relationship with the Father. As we talked about intimacy, he lived simply, as simplicity was one of our disciplines. He sought solitude. He surrendered his will to the Father's will daily. He lived a prayerful, humble life characterized by self-control, as you just mentioned, Jimmy. It's like he could have just spoke it out of existence, right? But it's his sacrifice that distinguishes the Son of God from all other historical figures and identifies him as our Savior. So we haven't come back to this key verse in a little bit, so let's come back to it now. But Philippians 3:10, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to death. The Amplified version talks about, for my determined purpose is that I may know him, that I may progressively become more deeply and intimately acquainted with him, perceiving and recognizing and understanding the wonders of his person more strongly and more clearly, and that I may in that same way come to know the power outflowing from his resurrection, and that I may so share his sufferings as to be continually transformed in spirit into his likeness, even to his death. So, the goal of this one is to become a living, breathing sacrifice, as we walk the walk. So what does this involve? What is sacrifice anyway? It may take an entire lifetime for us to really understand what, the term sacrifice is in a, biblical context. But because I know at times we can find ourselves preoccupied with our own self-pity, our own, consumed with our own thoughts, our own selves, or, things like that. And we kind of lose sight of sacrifices that can be made. And I want to pause here for a second and say, we would not, church, Authentic Life Fellowship, Lower C Church, we would not be where we're at without the people that that came before us. And we're talking way, way, way back. We're just not talking about 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We're talking way before then. People that instilled, godly discipline in the lives of your pastor. Josh, our deacons, just different leaders, spiritual, godly, women in the church that have been cultivated over years of relationship with other people. So, and a lot of the sacrifices, we're enjoying the things today because of a lot of sacrifices of people, before. But as we look to example, and they were they were not selfish, they were selfless. Our beautiful campus that was built, the financial burden that they took on back in the mid 60s for us to enjoy the campus that we are now. So, but as we look at, examples, God, if we don't forget the sacrifices, the people that made before us, it can start teaching us a valuable lesson and thinking about things more than just ourselves, thinking about more than just the moment that we're in. And then we start beginning to realize that, life does not revolve around us. We've already talked about that. We're not all that. It's not about us. It's about God. It's about Christ. It's about living in his will. So our comfort, our desires, our dreams, our plans can start taking a back seat and be subject to the will of God. And it can become, if we cultivate this discipline of sacrifice, then it becomes more about him and less about us. Jimmy, you may have touched on it earlier.
I think this particular discipline is, in my humble opinion, I think the sharpest knife in the box. In that, all the other disciplines are what they are. But when a person is given to sacrifice, it cuts deeper and it cuts quicker. You look at Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa left everything that she could have had for everything that she was. Mm-hmm. And the world may argue a lot of things, but it can't argue sacrifice. When we do what is right and good for the sole reason that it's good and right, there's no defense against that. And they go, well, why would you even do that? Because of Christ in me. This is what Jesus did, and this is what, I'm going to make a very bold statement right here.
Don't leave me hanging alone. We're already out, Josh. So
that's right. This could be my last statement. We, as the modern day church, capital C church, must remember and begin to practice with greater fervor the art of the sacrifice. If we hope to build forward what we, like you said earlier, that we enjoy today.
Yeah.
Time, talents, treasures, spiritual, church life. If we don't make those sacrifices today, consistently and persistently, then the church, as it will be, has the potential of significant difference.
Yeah, listen, every generation has been called to sacrifice for the sake of, the Lord. But, as we talk about sacrifice here, God may call us to sacrifice our, very lives, maybe, but we're talking about being, more, a living sacrifice day in and day out. What are the things that God wants us to do daily for him, and kind of put our needs to the back burner? Now, I'm not saying, you never have to do anything for yourself. You never can have fun. You can't have nice things. I'm not saying any of that. But what I'm saying was, an opportunity arises, to capitalize on it, because here's what I've always understood is that God's will is going to be accomplished with or without me.
Yeah.
He doesn't need me at all. Not one iota, right? But to be called upon by the King of Kings and Lord of Lords to say, Jeff, I want you to do my will in this area. If we're obedient in that, what a blessing and a privilege, that is. And Paul talks about us being, in Romans 12:1, he says, I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. Paul's saying, I urge you, I beg you. Why does he do that? Because one, he knows it's not going to come naturally to us. We're selfish by nature, because sometimes that nature ends up taking over more than anything else. But sacrifice hurts. It's not natural. It's, it's countercultural, counterintuitive to, what's going on in the world. We are hardwired to take care of ourselves. We are hardwired to protect ourselves, to be on guard, to preserve our way of life, no matter the cost. And to say sacrifice, it's something, totally foreign to most people, but we're called upon to be that sacrifice, for God. And what that means is, as we get out of bed, as we arrive at work, we go to school, we carry out our personal responsibilities, we're at play, we in our evening time, whatever it is, we are to do the things that God asks us to do in a deliberate act of submission, out of obedience to God. And when those opportunities come up to give of our time, our talent, our treasure, our capabilities, our whatever it is, we should do those things. And to, like I said, every generation has been called to sacrifice something. Every generation before us, my generation has been called. We are one generation away from, chaos, if you will. So, do what?
A big difference. Yeah.
Yeah. So this path of sacrifice, it leads to, the call of Paul, it leads to a living, breathing sacrifice. God may call us to give our life ultimately, but how cool is it to be a living, breathing sacrifice each and every day in the things that we do, to do the things that God wants us to do, to be obedient so we can walk in the Spirit, to cultivate those things that we talked about, the fruit of the Spirit, peace being one of them, self-control being another. To sacrifice is to give up something for the sake of something else. And as with all disciplines, the act of sacrifice begins small. It may not have anything to do financially. It might be saying, you know what, I'm going to give up my Starbucks latte for $5 and I'm going to help somebody out on the street. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what it means for you. Or it might be, you know what, I usually watch college football on Saturdays for 8 hours. I'm going to do it for 6 hours. I'll give 2 hours doing sermons, somewhere. Start small. But as we consistently carry it out, we start getting those wins, right? It becomes, habitual. It becomes something that we enjoy, and it's a discipline of sacrifice. It's something that will help us develop in a lot of areas of our lives, whether it be personally or relationally, or the things that we own, and we just have a different perspective on all of those things, right? So let me close out here with 3 things, and I'll turn it over to you for a couple final thoughts. So, if we're going to sacrifice and cultivate this discipline of sacrifice, it needs to be applied in those 3 areas I talked about: personally, relationally, and sort of our, materially. A personal sacrifice begins with simply a choice. Do I want to give up the things that I want to actually do something for the Lord? Am I going to trust myself more than I'm going to trust God? We have to understand and get to a point in our lives that, what are we going to give up? Are we going to give up our time that is valuable, our resources that is hard sought, because you work every day? But we have to ask ourselves, and I challenge you this week, what personally can you sacrifice for the Lord that you're not, today? Relationally, what relationship are you willing to give up? Abraham was willing to give up his son. What I'll say about this is sometimes we treat our relationships and our families almost like idols. And as much as I love my family, they can't be higher than God, because if they are, they're out of whack, right? So our relationship should not detract us from our relationship with God, as good as they are, or as bad as they may be. So think about any relationships you have and make sure they're in the proper perspective, with God being first. And then sort of our, material sacrifices, just, a consistent willingness to give of our time, of our intellect, our talents, our treasure. And, our part is cultivating a generosity, and just leave it up to God to find the opportunity. But in cultivating these disciplines, to help us with this discipline of sacrifice, as we give things over to God in all areas of our life. So if you want to be like Christ, discipline yourself to be a living, breathing, do something sacrifice for him. So 55, Jimmy, what you got?
All right. My final thought is this: the first benefactor of our sacrifice is ourselves. Nothing will transform you more quickly. Nothing will take you to greater heights of satisfaction. Nothing will take you to greater valleys of humility than sacrifice. And you touched on it earlier, is when you are willing and desires to be a person of sacrifice, what it is and when it comes, you will be the first benefactor, even ahead of those that may be the secondary benefactors. So, yes, sacrifice changes a lot of things. And people might not always remember what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. That's
true. That is true.
So,
well, brother, I have enjoyed the last 4 weeks. I know we're supposed to go 3, but, be flexible.
Everybody be sure to fill out your teacher evaluations.
That's right. Send it in.
And
see if we get another shot.
Be sure to join us tomorrow night, where Prof. Josh will be announcing his upcoming module in our Discipleship University. So, Jeff, you did a great job. It was a great choice. You did a great job of giving highlights and insights. And I can't encourage enough. If you haven't done it yet, please, serve yourself. You'll be glad you did.
Well, I've enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity. If you want to join us for the Rafa Clinic online banquet, look for a post on Facebook, and you can watch it live on Facebook or YouTube, or go to the Rafa Clinic website and watch it there. So I'm going to jump over there and do that. I have a busy night. So
very good.
All right.
Well, good night, everyone. Appreciate you, brother. You did great.
All right. Take care.